Hi there, this is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer, with another book review. In this video, we're discussing The Incendiaries, written by RO Kwon. This is a bit of a difficult book to rate and review, because in many ways it's good, and in many ways it's not. The writing is very sparse. It's a very short book, about 200 or so pages. The sentences don't allow for a lot of filler. So sometimes the sentences are well structured, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they feel very difficult to get through. The blurb promised a very engaging, very thrilling book as well, but it's not really. What happens in the book is very different to the blurb for most of it. So the thrilling elements happen towards the end, the very end of the book, and the book is a very, very slow build-up to those elements. But the blurb made it sound like those elements, those thrilling elements, play a part for most of the book. But it doesn't. So in a lot of ways, I felt disappointed. But the writing style and the way the author brings such clarity into what we see as a reader in this book and what the characters are in the book makes up for that a little bit. This book felt more like a romance and a drama than a thriller. Even though the blurb seemed to promise a thriller, it's not really. It also feels like a coming-of-age sort of story as well, but for college-age people. The two main characters, Will and Phoebe, they seem to be a bit damaged, both of them, and they seem both to be a bit naive, a bit incomplete as characters, and they're learning about themselves a lot while they're in college. So Will is going to college. He was at a Bible college before, and now he's going to a different college. He was a born-again Christian, and now he's not. He doesn't believe in religion at all now in the book. And Phoebe seems to be a bit lost, a bit damaged as well. So she was big into piano when she was growing up, and she was leaning towards trying to go to college for music, and then being a pianist or something in music in her future. But she gave that up, and before going to college, there was a big upheaval in her life, a big accident, when she was driving and there was a car accident and her mother died, and she survived. And that creates her character for this story, in this timeline. She's very damaged. She has a lot of bad memories about that, a lot of psychological damage, and she's trying to work through that, but she seems not to be working through that in a very positive way. So they're both very damaged people, and they meet almost accidentally at a party at college, and then their romance starts to develop and blossom, and that seems to be the main focus of this story. Their relationship is at the same time intense and a bit juvenile. So they fight over petty things all the time. They seem to be a bit selfish at times with their wants and their needs. They don't seem to be that good for each other, but they stick together. And for a lot of the book, they seem to be quite happy and comfortable, but there's this undercurrent that goes on in their relationship where they don't seem to be as happy as they think they are. And as a reader, I thought maybe they're better off not being together. That was my feeling. As the plot progresses, we see Phoebe be interested in this other group that's near the college, and it's more of a religious group run by a guy who's very mysterious, and he seems to draw people into this group, and it comes across as a cult. You get that feeling early on. He's drawing these characters in, these people in, and he seems to be breaking them down a bit. You get glimpses of what goes on in this group. They have activities where they have to bare their souls, basically, and then they're asked questions, and they're almost eroded and broken down into a mess. And there's then this leader builds them up. Very cult-like behaviour. And that goes on in this book. You get glimpses of that. And Will decides to join the group as well. And he's joining the group to find out what's going on at the start. And he seems to get hooked into it a bit. But he seems to be aware that it's a cult. And he recognises that. And he's trying to drag Phoebe away from it. But Phoebe wants to stay in there. She's getting something from it. She's getting some comfort. She's getting some easing of the pain in her own mind from being in this group. And that worries Will a lot. and they start to split a bit. Their relationship starts to be damaged from Phoebe's involvement in this group. That's another part of this plot. So it's about two people drawn together, but then something dragging them apart. The parts where the blurb says this book is meant to be a thriller, those parts only happen in the last 10 or so pages of the book. So remember, it's a very short book, so there's not much room for things to happen. But I would have thought those things, those events, would have happened early on in the book, because the blurb basically promises that Will becomes obsessed with something that Phoebe did in this group, this cult that she's in. There's some big disaster that happened that people think this cult was involved in, and Will's obsessed with trying to find out the truth about Phoebe and the cult. That happens in the last 10 or so pages, a big letdown, because you have to get through a lot of this book to get to that. And I thought it would have been a bigger moment in this book and played a bigger part. So I was let down by that, and I was disappointed. The other thing about this book is the different characters. The chapters are from their point of view. So we have a switch of point of view from chapter to chapter. But it didn't feel like the characters had different voices. It all felt the same. That was a bit of a shame, because the writing style of this book is quite good. It's very well structured, very compact, very precise writing, I would say. And the imagery is quite vivid. So it's a shame to have vivid imagery, but not have that imagery presented in different voices. So it's the same voice for every character. And I thought that was a shame, because the structure of this book is very good. I was disappointed the fact that we didn't have the thriller element coming in to the very end, and also having points of view all sound the same was disappointing as well. I think the writer had an opportunity to make this story much more than it was. Will, who's one of our main characters, I did like this character. He seemed well crafted, he had a good background, a good history, and his motivations in the current timeline suited his history and his background. He's probably the most well-drawn character in this book, the best crafted. Did I think his motivations at the end of the book, his actions, seemed consistent with the rest of the book? I'm not really sure on that. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. So there's a bit of a disjointed feel between the Will for most of the book and then the Will for the last 10 or so pages. But overall, he's a really good character, very well drawn. It's a shame that his chapters, his points of view, didn't seem to be in his own voice. That's the biggest letdown for this character, because if they were in his own voice, I think it would have been a much better character, almost perfect. Phoebe. Now, as a character, I engage with her backstory more than her present timeline. I didn't buy into her motivations for wanting to join this cult group. It didn't really seem real. She just comes across as very selfish, self-centered. It's all about her, what she wants, her desires, her needs. She doesn't seem to care about other characters at all in the book. I didn't buy into the character in the present day timeline at all. It didn't engage me as much as Will did. Her backstory, her past, I felt that a lot. I engaged with that, but not her present day timeline, not the present Phoebe. The other characters in this book, apart from the cult leader, the group leader, don't have chapters from their points of view, and they're only discussed or seen through the eyes of the other characters in the book. So I haven't discussed anybody else in this section. The leader of the cult, leader of this group that plays a pivotal role for Phoebe in this story, I haven't discussed that character either in this section. Even though he has a bit of a backstory, a bit of a history, there's not enough of him to discuss in this section. So he comes across as almost a shadow of a character really in this story. While being well written, the structure of the book, the sentences, the imagery is quite well written. It was a bit of a letdown that the points of view, the chapters, weren't different. So the voices of the characters weren't different. Also the fact that the blurb seemed to promise something that wasn't delivered until the very end of the story. That was another letdown. I rate this a 2.5 out of 5. I think this author could write better books. And I'm not sure if she has, but it'd be interesting to know if the author has more books out there. I haven't researched into that, but I would be interested to try more books from this author because I think the author has better books in her to write. I do review books from many different genres on my channel. Check out my channel, and while you're there, subscribe. I'm sure you'll find something on my channel that you like.